So, I mean, that is the land of unconfirmed.
Yes, we came, we saw, he died.
Did it have anything to do with your visit?
No, I'm sure it did. They're going to be captured or killed.
Democratic Jewish state between Israel and the United States.
The desert is blooming again, and we can be so proud.
Iran is the largest supporter of terrorism in the world today.
Out of sight and out of touch.
That's pretty humorous, Dave.
Now, this hearing that Hillary had before this congressional committee was somewhat a farce because the Republicans were not prepared to admit and to acknowledge that the U.S. policy relative to Libya in 2011 was illegal, and its military actions through NATO was a criminal act. The Republicans were not willing to deal with the question of why was the United States in Libya in the first place. This seriously damaged that hearing, and it actually benefited Hillary Clinton, at least for the short term. Hillary accused the Republicans of playing politics over the attack of the U.S. diplomatic compound in Benghazi that left 4 U.S. diplomats, including Ambassador Chris Stevens, dead. As I have said before in the past, Christopher Stevens, he deserved to die for the actions that he had undertaken, which led to the killing of Muammar Gaddafi and several of his sons in Libya. They lied and they connived to bring about the downfall of the Libyan government, which has left Libya in a failed state. And in fact, the very act of going into Libya militarily under the banner of NATO, it alone was all about politics. So how can they say that the hearing was about politics? Everything in the United States at that level is about politics. Hillary was all about improving her portfolio, proving that she had the gonads to be a chicken hawk, to carry out war, to foment war on behalf of the Zionist corporate international bankers.
We had a lot of other threats coming in. We were still worried about Cairo.
I understand, but you had your people on the ground that were being attacked. I want to get back to the survivors in the little time I have left. Did you talk to the survivors directly at all?
Yes, I did.
At any point, can you tell us when?
It was kind of a rolling series of conversations. When they came back to the State Department, I met with and talked with them. As you know, their names have never been made public. I don't intend to today.
And can you give me a month?
I'm sorry, what?
A month?
It was, for some of them, it was less time than that. And for one of them, I talked with him on the phone. I did not get to physically see him until he'd been released from the hospital, and that was early in 2013.
I think, Mr. Chairman, there's 2 messages here. I think the first message is that is the message that you sent to your personnel the night of the attack, that you went home. They all stayed there and you didn't go back to the next morning. I think the second message that is sent is that you used the FBI's inquiry as an excuse not to check in with your agents who were on the ground, who survived that horrible night, just to ask them how they were. I yield back.
Well, if I could respond, Congresswoman, I think that, again, is part of a theory that you and your colleagues are attempting to weave. It was made very clear that the FBI wanted a fresh and clean opportunity to speak with the survivors, which I totally understand. And in fact, their investigation has led to the charging of at least one person, and I hope we find all of them and bring them to justice.
The land of unconfirmed.
Yes, we came, we saw, he died.
Did it have anything to do with your visit?
No, I'm sure it did. They're going to be captured or killed.
Democratic Jewish state between Israel and the United States.
The desert is blooming again, and we can be so proud.
Iran is the largest supporter of terrorism in the world today.
Out of sight and out of touch.
That's pretty humorous, Dave.
The truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. The truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Madam Secretary, I want to thank you very much for being here today to testify before Congress on this very important issue. This is your third time. This week, our chairman, Mr. Gowdy, was interviewed in a lengthy media profile. During his interview, he complained that he was, and I quote, he has an impossible job. That's what the chairman said, impossible job. He said it is impossible to conduct a serious, fact-centric investigation in such a, quote, political environment. I have great respect for the chairman, but on this score, he is absolutely wrong. In fact, it has been done by his own Republican colleagues in the House on this very issue, Benghazi. The Republican chairman of the House Intelligence Committee conducted an extensive, bipartisan, 2-year investigation and issued a detailed report. The Senate Intelligence Committee and the Senate Homeland Security Committee also conducted a bipartisan investigation. Those bipartisan efforts respected and honored the memories of the 4 brave Americans who gave their lives in Benghazi. Ambassador Chris Stevens, Sean Smith, Tyrone Woods, and Glenn Doherty. The problem is that the Republican caucus did not like the answers they got from those investigations, so they set up this select committee with no rules, no deadline, and an unlimited budget. And they set them loose, Madam Secretary, because you're running for president. Clearly, it is possible to conduct a serious bipartisan investigation. What is impossible is for any reasonable person to continue denying that Republicans are squandering millions of taxpayer dollars on this abusive effort to derail Secretary Clinton's presidential campaign. In the chairman's interview, he tried to defend against this criticism by attempting to cast himself as the victim. And he complained about attacks on the credibility of the Select Committee. His argument would be more compelling if Republicans weren't leading the charge. As we all know, Representative Kevin McCarthy, Speaker Boehner's second-in-command and the chairman's close friend, admitted that they established the Select Committee to drive down Secretary Clinton's poll numbers. Democrats didn't say that. The second-in-command in the House said that, a Republican. Republican Congressman Richard Hanna said the Select Committee was, quote, designed to go after Secretary Clinton. And one of the chairman's own hand-picked investigators, a self-proclaimed conservative Republican, charged that he was fired in part for not going along with these plans to, quote, hyper-focus on Hillary Clinton, end of quote. These stark admissions reflect exactly what we have seen inside the Select Committee for the past year. Let's just take a look at the facts. Since January, Republicans have canceled every single hearing on our schedule for the entire year, except for this one, Secretary Clinton. They also canceled numerous interviews that they had planned with the Defense Department and the CIA officials. Instead of doing that, they said what they were going to do. Republicans zeroed in on Secretary Clinton, her speechwriters, her IT staffers, and her campaign officials. This is what the Republicans did, not the Democrats. When Speaker Boehner established this Select Committee, he justified it by arguing that it would, quote, cross jurisdictional lines. I assume he meant we would focus on more than just Secretary of State. But Madam Secretary, you're sitting there by yourself. The Secretary of Defense is not on your left. The Director of the CIA is not on your right. That's because Republicans abandoned their own plans to question those top officials. So instead of being cross-jurisdictional, Republicans just crossed them off the list. Last weekend, the chairman told the Republican colleagues to shut up and stop talking about the Select Committee. What I want to know is this, and this is a key question. Why tell the Republicans to shut up when they are telling the truth, but not when they are attacking Secretary Clinton with reckless accusations that are demonstrably false? Why not tell them to shut up then? Carly Fiorina has said that Secretary Clinton has blood on her hands. Mike Huckabee accused her of ignoring the warning calls from dying Americans in Benghazi. Senator Rand Paul said Benghazi was a 3 a.m. phone call that she never picked up. And Senator Lindsey Graham tweeted, "Where the hell were you on the night of the Benghazi attack?" Everyone on this panel knows these accusations are baseless, from our own investigation and all those before it. Yet, Republican members of this Select Committee remain silent. On Monday, the Democrats issued a report showing that none of the 54 witnesses the committee interviewed substantiated these wild Republican claims. Secretary Clinton did not order the military to stand down, and she neither approved nor denied requests for additional security. I ask that our report be included in the official record for today's hearing, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection.
What is so telling is that we issued virtually the same report a year ago. Same report. When we first joined the Select Committee, I asked my staff to put together a complete report and database setting forth the questions that had been asked about the attacks and all of the answers that were provided in the 8 previous investigations. I ask that this report also be included in the record, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection.
The problem is that rather than accepting these facts, Republicans continue to spin new conspiracy theories that are just as outlandish and inaccurate. For example, the chairman recently tried to argue that Sidney Blumenthal was Secretary Clinton's primary advisor on Libya. And this past Sunday, Representative Pompeo claimed on national television that Secretary Clinton relied on Sidney Blumenthal for most of her intelligence on Libya. Earlier this week, the Washington Post fact-checker awarded this claim 4 Pinocchios, its worst rating. Here's the bottom line. The Select Committee has spent 17 months and $4.7 million of taxpayer money. We've held 4 hearings and conducted 54 interviews and depositions. Yes, we have received some new emails from Secretary Clinton, Ambassador Stevens, and others. And yes, we have conducted some new interviews. But these documents and interviews do not show any nefarious activity. In fact, it's just the opposite. The new information we have obtained confirms and corroborates the core facts we already knew from 8 previous investigations. They provide more detail, but they do not change the basic conclusions. It is time now for the Republicans to end this taxpayer-funded fishing expedition. We need to come together and shift from politics to policy. That's what the American people want, shifting from politics to policy. We need to finally make good on our promises to the families. And the families only asked us to do 3 things. 1, do not make this a political football. 2, find the facts. 3, do everything in your power to make sure that this does not happen again. And so we need to start focusing on what we here in Congress can do to improve the safety and security of our diplomatic corps in the future. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Now, Elijah Cummings, who most likely is going to be running for the U.S. Senate for the state of Maryland, he reminds me of some of those old Negroes during slavery who, when other enslaved Africans had set the house of the pale-skinned so-called master on fire, these old Negroes would say, "Massa, our house burning, Massa, our house burning, Massa." And then they would actually, with their own lives at stake, put their own lives at stake and run into that burning house to try to save the old Massa or the children or the wife of the Massa. This is what Elijah Cummings reminds me of as you're looking at the black Libyans being brutalized, being made to lick cloth that has been soaked in urine, being made to lick it by the terrorists, these Arab terrorists, supported and backed by Hillary Rodham Clinton. That's right. Right there in Africa. This lying Hillary Rodham Clinton, who lied and said that Muammar Gaddafi was using aircraft to bomb his own people and that he was attacking his own people. All lies. And then yet we're going to have these weak-kneed Negroes who's going to say we support Hillary Clinton. Well, the reality remains today that under her husband's presidency, the record number of blacks in America were imprisoned. The 3 strikes and you're out came under William Jefferson Clinton. And then here it is, his wife is carrying out the Bush and Cheney foreign policy to overthrow Libya. They're bombing the black city of Tawerga. They're brutalizing and killing black people in Libya. Something never done under the leadership of Muammar Gaddafi. And then they turn around and say that Gaddafi is killing his own people, the savage dictator. I can't stand weak-kneed Negroes like this. They seek power. They seek to ingratiate themselves in the minds of these pale-skinned savage killers who terrorize the entire world. And only now, because Russia has entered the equation in Syria, only now, because of that, Syria, the government, is still standing. We wish that Russia had entered the equation in Libya, but they did not. They abstained from the United Nations Resolution 1973, which the United States, under the auspices of NATO, violated. They engaged in a criminal act, a criminal action against Libya. These people are war criminals. Shame on you, Elijah Cummings. This is T. West with AfriSynergy.
Gavel this session to order. There will be a few breaks during the course of the day. She's doing a little photo opportunity. She's going to be seated there. Her lawyers, her political aides, her advisors will be seated behind her. I think Trey Gowdy is getting ready to bring this session to a formal start, and it's curious to see if she will be sworn in publicly or privately. We'll know in the next few seconds. The camera, the photographers, all the crews there are being told to sit down, get out of the way, and here's the chairman.
Good morning. Committee will come to order. The chair notes the presence of a quorum. Good morning. Welcome, Madam Secretary. Welcome to each of you. This is a public hearing of the Benghazi Select Committee. Just a couple of quick administrative matters before we start, Madam Secretary. There are predetermined breaks, but I want to make it absolutely clear we can take a break for any reason or for no reason. If you or anyone would just simply alert me, then we will take a break, and it can be for any reason or for no reason. To our guests, we are happy to have you here. The witness deserves to hear the questions, and the members deserve to hear the answers. So proper decorum must be observed at all times. No reaction to questions or answers. No disruptions. Some committees take an incremental approach to decorum. I do not. This is your one and only notice. Madam Secretary, the ranking member and I will give opening statements, and then you will be recognized for your opening statement, and then after that, the members will alternate from one side to the other. And because you have already been sworn, we will go straight to your opening. So I will now recognize myself, and then recognize Mr. Cummings, and then you, Madam Secretary. Chris Stevens, Sean Smith, Glenn Doherty, and Tyrone Woods served this country with courage and with honor. And they were killed under circumstances that most of us could never imagine. Terrorists pour through the front gate of an American facility, attacking people and property with machine guns, mortars, and fire. It is important that we remember how these 4 men died. It is equally important that we remember how these 4 men lived and why. They were more than 4 images on a television screen. They were husbands and fathers and sons and brothers and family and friends. They were Americans who believed in service and sacrifice. Many people speak wistfully of a better world, but do little about it. These 4 went out and actually tried to make it better, and it cost them their lives. So we know what they gave us. What do we owe them? Justice for those that killed them. We owe their families our everlasting gratitude, respect. We owe them and each other the truth. The truth about why we were in Libya. The truth about what we were doing in Libya. The truth about the escalating violence in Libya before we were attacked and these 4 men were killed. The truth about requests for additional security. The truth about requests for additional personnel. The truth about requests for additional equipment. The truth about where and why our military was positioned as it was on the anniversary of 9/11. The truth about what was happening and being discussed in Washington while our people were under attack. The truth about what led to the attacks, and the truth about what our government told the American people after the attacks. Why were there so many requests for more security personnel and equipment, and why were those requests denied in Washington? Why did the State Department, compound and facility, not even come close to meeting proper security specifications? What policies were we pursuing in Libya that required a physical presence in spite of the escalating violence? Who in Washington was aware of the escalating violence? What precautions, if any, were taken on the anniversary of 9/11? What happened in Washington after the first attack, and what was our response to that attack? What did the military do or not do? What did our leaders in Washington do or not do, and when? Why was the American public given such divergent accounts of what caused these attacks? And why is it so hard to get information from the very government these four men represented, served, and sacrificed for? Even after an accountability review board and a half-dozen congressional investigations, these and other questions still lingered. And these questions lingered because previous investigations were not thorough. These questions lingered because those previous investigations were narrow in scope and either incapable or unwilling to access the facts and evidence necessary to answer all relevant questions. So the House of Representatives, including some Democrats, I hasten to add, asked this committee to write the final definitive accounting of what happened in Benghazi. This committee is the first committee to review more than 50,000 pages of documents because we insisted that they be produced. This committee is the first committee to demand access to more eyewitnesses because serious investigations talk to as many eyewitnesses as possible. This committee is the first committee to thoroughly and individually interview scores of other witnesses, many of them for the first time. This committee is the first committee to review thousands of pages of documents from top State Department personnel. This committee is the first committee to demand access to relevant documents from the CIA, the FBI, the Department of Defense, and even the White House. This committee is the first committee to demand access to the emails to and from Ambassador Chris Stevens. How could an investigation possibly be considered serious without reviewing the emails of the person most knowledgeable about Libya? This committee is the first committee, the only committee, to uncover the fact that Secretary Clinton exclusively used personal email on her own personal server for official business and kept the public record, including emails about Benghazi and Libya, in her own custody and control for almost 2 years after she left office. You will hear a lot today about the Accountability Review Board. Secretary Clinton has mentioned it more than 70 times in her previous testimony before Congress. But when you hear about the ARB, you should also know the State Department leadership handpicked the members of the ARB. The ARB never interviewed Secretary Clinton. The ARB never reviewed her emails. And Secretary Clinton's top advisor was allowed to review and suggest changes to the ARB before the public ever saw it. There's no transcript of the ARB interview, so it's impossible to know whether all relevant questions were asked and answered. And because there's no transcript, it is also impossible to cite the ARB interviews with any particularity at all. That is not independent. That is not accountability. That is not a serious investigation. You will hear there were previous congressional investigations into Benghazi, and that is true. And it should make you wonder why those investigations failed to interview so many witnesses and access so many documents. If those previous congressional investigations were really serious and thorough, how did they miss Ambassador Stevens' emails? If those previous investigations were serious and thorough, how did they miss Secretary Clinton's emails? If those congressional investigations really were serious and thorough, why did they fail to interview dozens of key State Department witnesses, including agents on the ground who experienced the attacks firsthand? Just last month, 3 years after Benghazi, top aides finally returned documents to the State Department. A month ago, this committee received 1,500 new pages of Secretary Clinton's emails related to Libya and Benghazi, 3 years after the attacks. Now, a little over 2 weeks ago, this committee received nearly 1,400 pages of Ambassador Stevens' emails 3 years after the attacks. It is impossible to conduct a serious fact-centric investigation without access to the documents from the former Secretary of State, the ambassador who knew more about Libya than anyone else, and testimony from witnesses who survived the attacks. Madam Secretary, I understand there are people, frankly, in both parties who have suggested that this investigation is about you. Let me assure you it is not, and let me assure you why it is not. This investigation is about 4 people who were killed representing our country on foreign soil. It is about what happened before, during, and after the attacks that killed them. It is about what this country owes to those who risk their lives to serve it. And it is about the fundamental obligation of government to tell the truth, always, to the people that it purports to represent. Madam Secretary, not a single member of this committee signed up to investigate you or your email. We signed up to investigate and therefore honor the lives of 4 people that we sent into a dangerous country to represent us, and to do everything we can to prevent it from happening to others. Our committee has interviewed 100 witnesses. Not a single one of them has been named Clinton until today. You were the Secretary of State for this country at all relevant times. So, of course, the committee is going to want to talk to you. You are an important witness. You are one important witness among 100 important witnesses. And I do understand you wanted to come sooner than today, so let me be clear why that did not happen. You had an unusual email arrangement, which meant the State Department could not produce your emails to us. You made exclusive use of personal email and a personal server. And when you left the State Department, you kept the public record to yourself for almost 2 years. And it was you and your attorneys who decided what to return and what to delete. Those decisions were your decisions, not our decisions. It was only in March of this year we learned of this email arrangement. And since we learned of this email arrangement, we have interviewed dozens of witnesses, only one of whom was solely related to your email arrangement. And that was the shortest interview of all, because that witness invoked his Fifth Amendment privilege against incrimination. Making sure the public record is complete is what serious investigations do, so it was important and remains important that this committee have access to all of Ambassador Stevens' emails, the emails of other senior leaders and witnesses, and it is important to gain access to all of your emails, Madam Secretary. Your emails are no less or no more important than the emails of anyone else. It just took us a little bit longer to get them, and it garnered a little more attention in the process. I want you to take note during this hearing how many times congressional Democrats call on this administration to make long-awaited documents available to us. They won't. Take note of how many witnesses congressional Democrats ask us to schedule for interview. They won't. We would be much closer to finding out what happened and writing the final definitive report if Democrats on this committee had helped us just a little bit pursue the facts. But if the Democrats on this committee had their way, dozens of witnesses never would have been interviewed. Your public record would still be private. Thousands of documents never would have been accessed. And we wouldn't have the emails of our own ambassador. That may be smart politics, but it is a lousy way to run a serious investigation. There are certain characteristics that make our country unique in the annals of history. We are the greatest experiment in self-governance the world has ever known. And part of that self-governance comes self-scrutiny, even of the highest officials. Our country is strong enough to handle the truth, and our fellow citizens expect us to pursue the truth wherever the facts take us. So this committee is going to do what we pledged to do and what should have been done, frankly, a long time ago, which is interview all relevant witnesses, examine all relevant evidence, and access all relevant documents. And we're going to pursue the truth in a manner worthy of the memory of the 4 people who lost their lives and worthy of the respect of our fellow citizens. And we are going to write that final definitive accounting of what happened in Benghazi. And we would like to do it with your help and the help of our Democrat colleagues, but make no mistake, we are going to do it nonetheless. Because understanding what happened in Benghazi goes to the heart of who we are as a country and the promises we make to those that we send into harm's way. They deserve the truth. They deserve the whole truth. They deserve nothing but the truth. The people we work for deserve the truth. The friends and family of the 4 who lost their lives deserve the truth. We're going to find the truth because there is no statute of limitations on the truth. With that, I would recognize my friend from Maryland.
So basically, had the Republicans focused on one key thing, and that is the question of why was the United States in Libya in the first place, then they would have fared far better with going up against Hillary Clinton and her lies. But they did not, because the policy was actually a Republican policy. Now, what policy am I talking about? I am talking about the policy of overthrowing specific and particular nations, one of them being Libya. That was a Republican policy. Hillary Clinton was actually, through the State Department, carrying out and promoting a George W. Bush, Dick Cheney policy. So therefore, most of the Republicans on this panel would not place a great deal of focus on the truth about why was the United States in Libya in the first place, because it would have went against the chicken hawks within the Republican Party, such as John McCain and Lindsey Graham, who were locked in step with Hillary Clinton relative to Libya. This is T. West with AfriSynergy.